Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with A Little Princess. Chapter 8, Ram Dass and the Mysterious Indian Gentleman. There were often breathtaking sunsets in the square, downstairs or on the street. Sara could only see part of the sunset between the chimneys and over the rooftops. But there was a place where she could watch the sun setting and the colors change, and that was from her attic window. On those evenings when the square would begin to glow with a dusky radiance, Sara knew it was a special time when the colors of sunset tinted the whole world the color of roses and violets. Here, Sara could feel as if she had the sky and world to herself, because no one else would ever appear in any of the attic windows. But there was an exceptionally beautiful sunset just a few days after the Indian gentleman arrived in his new home. Fortunately, the afternoon's work was already done in the kitchen, and Sara was able to slip away and go upstairs. As usual, she climbed on the table and stood lookout. It was an incredible moment. A deep, rich, rosy light filled the air, and the birds flying by were silhouetted over the tops of houses. What a splendid sunset, Sara thought quietly to herself. It makes me feel almost afraid, as if something strange is going to happen. It's funny how the most splendid ones always make me feel like that. Hearing a sound a few yards away from a window, Sara turned her head. Someone else had come up to look at the sunset. It was one of the Indian servants with the white turbans who worked for the new owner of the house next door. The sound she had heard was the chatter of a small monkey. He had snuggled up in the servant's arms. As Sara looked at her new neighbor, her first thought was that he looked sad and homesick. She felt sure he had come to look at the sunset because he had seen so few in England and must have longed for the sight of one. She looked at him intently for a second and then smiled at him. This man's whole expression changed and he smiled back. At that moment, the impish monkey, always ready for an adventure, suddenly broke loose. He jumped down onto the slates and ran across the roof, chattering all the way, and then he leaped onto her shoulders and from there down into the attic room. Even though the little monkey made her giggle and delight her, Sara knew he must return to his master, but she wasn't sure just how to go about it. She returned to the man, happy that she remembered some Hindustani, a language she had learned while she lived in India. "Will you let me catch him?" she asked. It was obvious that the man was out of delirious saliva that he could converse with someone in his own language. He explained that the monkey was a good pet and would not bite, but unfortunately it could be difficult to catch. As fast as lightning, he could dash from one spot to another. The man, whose name was Ram Dass, said the monkey was almost like his own child, but admitted that the creature did not always obey him. He also said that if Sara would give him permission, he would cross the roof to her room and retrieve the little intruder. "Please come over," she urged him. "Your monkey is flying all over the room. I think he's really frightened." Ram Dass slipped through the attic and crossed over to Sara's attic, as if he had been walking on rooftops all his life. He slipped through the skylight and dropped down on his feet without making a sound. Then he turned to Sara and bowed. The monkey saw him and uttered a little scream. Immediately, Ram Dass shut the skylight and dashed over after the frisky little fellow. It was not a very long chase. The monkey played catch me for a few minutes, almost as if for the fun of it, but before he could spring chattering onto Ram Dass's shoulder. Ram Dass thanked Sara for her assistance over and over again. She knew perfectly well he had seen a glance at the shabby condition of the attic where he had lived, but he spoke to her as if he were speaking to the daughter of a Rajah. The naughty little monkey, he had told her, petting the animal, was not as bad as he seemed. Ram Dass's master, who was ill, often found the monkey amusing and good company. He would have been terribly upset if the beloved pet had run away and got lost. Ram Dass bowed to Sara once more. He quietly departed through the skyline and ran across the slates as easily as the monkey had. When he was gone, Sara stood in the middle of the attic. Ram Dass's native costume and respectful manner had stirred up all her past memories. It seemed so strange to remember that she, the forlorn girl whom the cook had insulted so meanly just now before, had only a few years ago been surrounded by people who treated her as Ram Dass had. It was like a sort of dream, but that period in her life was over and could never come back. It certainly seemed that there was no way any change could take place now. Whatever comes, she said, straightening her thin body and lifting her head high. It cannot change one thing about me. Even if I'm a princess in rags and tatters, I can still be a princess inside. It would be easy to be a princess if we're dressed in satin and lace, but it was much more of a triumph to be one when no one knows it. This thought consoled Sara through the difficult day. One day she occupied herself was imagining things on the other side of the wall which divided Miss Minchin's boarding school from the Indian gentleman's house. The Indian man next door had evidently not fully recovered from some severe illness. In the kitchen, where the servants seemed to know everything, they were saying he was not really Indian. He was an English gentleman who had lived in India. It was said that he had nearly lost all his whole fortune. The shock had been great. He had almost died of a terrible disease some people called brain fever. Ever since, he had been in poor health. After a time, circumstances had changed and his possessions had all been restored to him. His troubles had all been connected with mines. And mines with diamonds with them, said the cook. No savings of mine ever goes into mines, especially not diamond ones, she said. With a side glance at Sara, we all know something about them. He felt as my father felt, Sara thought. He was ill as my father was, but he did not die. So her heart was more drawn to her new neighbor than before. She ran errands at night. Sara often stopped in front of the windows to catch a glimpse of him, sitting alone by his fire, holding tightly to the railing. She would bid him good night, as if he would not hear. Oh, I wish you had someone who would take care of you the way I used to take care of my father when he had a headache, she would whisper. Good night. God bless you. He always seems to think of one thing that hurts him now, Sara said to herself. He has gotten his money back, and he will get well in time, so he ought not to look so sad. Wonder if it's something else. If there was something else, Sara felt that the father of the large family would know about it. Sara had seen that the man she called Mr. Montmorency went to see their new neighbor often, and that Mrs. Montmorency and the children went too. Mr. Carrisford, the real name of the man everyone was referring to as the Indian gentleman, seemed particularly fond of the two older girls, Janet and Nora, who had been so concerned when their little brother had given Sara his sixpence. Janet told Mr. Carrisford about the encounter with the little girl who was not a beggar. He was quite interested, particularly because he had already heard from Ramdan about the hunters of the monkey on the roof. Ramdas had given a very clear picture of the dreary attic and the terrible living conditions under this young girl was living. Carmichael, Mr. Carrisford asked the father of the large family later, do you suppose that child could be next door in such condition? Do you suppose that the child could be living in such conditions as the one next door? If the child who was at Madame Pascal's school in Paris was the one you are searching for, Mr. Carmichael said carefully, anxious not to upset his friend, she is now in care of the people who could afford to take care of her. These people adopted this little girl because she was the best friend of their own daughter who died. They had no other children, and when Madame Pascal said they were extremely well-to-do Russians. And Madame Pascal truly did not know where they took her? Asked Mr. Carrisford. Mr. Carmichael shrugged his shoulders. Madame Pascal was a shrewd, worldly woman, and she was not too glad to get the little girl off her hands when her real father left her unprovided for, he explained. But you say the child was the one I am searching for, Mr. Carrisford interrupted. I am not sure. There's a difference in the ring. Madame Pascal pronounced it as if it were Carew instead of Crew, but that might just be the French accent. The circumstances are quite similar. An English officer in India had placed his motherless little girl at a school. Then he died suddenly after losing his fortune, Mr. Carmichael said. He had paused for a moment, as if a new thought had occurred to him. Are you sure this child was left at school in Paris? Yes, was the answer, because her mother was French, and I heard that she wanted her child to be educated in Paris. It seemed only likely that her father would arrange for her to be sent there. Mr. Carrisford went on. I must find her. If she is penniless, it is my fault. How can I get my life in order with such a thing in my mind? Poor Crew's child might be begging on the street. Try to be calm, Mr. Carmichael urged. Console yourself that when you find her, you have the rightful fortune turned over to her. Mr. Carrisford sighed deeply. Looking back, he said, I believe I would have handled things better when the mine threatened to fail. If I hadn't been responsible for other people's money, I might not have panicked and run away like a common swindler. But I cannot face my best friend and tell him I'd ruined him and his child. You mustn't tear yourself apart like this, Mr. Carmichael said, putting his hand on his friend's shoulder. You ran away, not because you lacked courage, but because you were half delirious already. 2 days later, you were in a hospital, deathly ill with brain fever. And when I regained consciousness, poor Crew was already dead and buried, Carrisford said sadly. I did not think of the little girl for months and months. You would think I remember the school where he sent his daughter, wouldn't you? Perhaps he never told you the actual name of the school. How about her name? Did he ever tell you that? Carrisford stopped for a moment and rubbed his forehead. He used to call her by a pet name, he said unhappily, but I can't remember it. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.